You make a really good point in Genius Kitchen that food companies, number one, know this as well, but they don't want you to know this. And so what's in it? What's in it for them? Why are we so tempted by all these wonderful foods that are killing us?
Oh man, well, it's about the bottom line. Food companies love having repeat customers, and they know that one of the best ways to earn the loyalty of a consumer is to blow their minds with hyper palatable, ultra processed foods. That's literally what ultra processed foods typically found within the aisles of most major modern supermarkets do. They push your brain to a literal bliss point beyond which self-control becomes futile, because these foods light up reward centers in our brain that that really make it difficult, if not impossible, to stop eating once you've dug into the pint of ice cream, or you've had maybe a handful of those tortilla chips. We tend to think of it as a moral failure when we're unable to moderate our consumption of these foods. But the reality is that these foods are very hard to moderate. And that's because willpower is a finite resource, and these foods hijack any semblance of willpower that we may have. There was a study that was published in 2018, funded by the National Institutes of Health, that found that when people eat these kinds of ultra-processed foods, so packaged, shelf-stable foods, frozen dinners, fried foods, commercial bread products, that when eating to satiety, in the scientific literature, the term is ad libitum feeding, people end up eating a calorie surplus of about 500 calories. If you eat 500, if you're in a calorie surplus and you eat 500 more calories than your body burns every day for a week, that's a pound of fat gain. That's a pound of fat stored every single week. That adds up to a spare tire really quickly. Conversely, what the researchers in this study found was that when they gave the same subjects access to minimally processed foods, the kinds of food that the type of dishes that you would cook for yourself, for example, they came in at an effortless calorie deficit when eating to the same degree of satiety. They were just as full, they were just as satisfied by their food, but they ended up at a calorie deficit of about 300 calories. So right there, that's an 800 calorie swing, right? 800 calories, that's a lot of calories. That's an 800 calorie swing determined purely by the quality of the food that you're eating. Many people who are overweight, who struggle with their weight, who feel that sense of moral failure over and over again because they can't stick to whatever diet it is that they're on. And they get told by their doctors, by their nutritionists, just eat less, move more, over and over and over again. That sense of failure, that deficit of willpower, right? That's because they're putting the cart before the horse. They're trying to moderate how much they are consuming of the foods that they were eating that got them into that overweight state in the first place. But the real insight from this study is the quality of the food that you're eating dictates the quantity of the food that you're going to eat. And so that's something that food manufacturers don't want you to know, right? Because the perspective of a food manufacturer is all foods fit. It's not our problem that you're overweight. You just ate too much of what it is that we're putting out, of what we're manufacturing. You just ate too much. It's your fault. It's your lack of willpower. All you got to do is eat less and all of your problems will be solved. But their foods are not designed to be moderated. They're designed to create repeat customers. They're designed so that you eat more of them. And so that's why I think those are the first foods that people ought to cut out, especially when on a weight loss journey, but also for good health. We know that the consumption of ultra processed foods, in fact, every 10% increase in ultra processed food consumption is associated with a 14% increased risk of early mortality. So these foods are literally killing us. And a little, it's the dose makes the poison to some degree, obviously, which that study has shown. But the best you can do at minimizing your consumption of those foods the better off you'll be. And again, the healthiest people buy a narrower range of good for you foods, and they buy those foods on loop.
So I think most people maybe by now are figuring out that a lot of these things are not good for us, and yet the addictive quality of these foods makes it really hard to give it up or wean yourself off of it. And you spend a great deal of time in the book giving us hacks of, okay, you know, instead of a highly processed grain product for munching on, take us through a few steps to wean ourselves off of this stuff we love. You bring up macaroni and cheese, for instance, that, you know, the ultimate comfort food, and you've got a great recipe for macaroni and cheese that uses carrot noodles in the new book. So yeah, help us out here, because you and I are all obviously on the same page here.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite recipes. It's funny that you brought it up. It's a vegan. So my cookbook is not a vegan cookbook, but this dish is a vegan. So it's a dairy-free mac and cheese using carrot noodles. So it's gluten-free, dairy-free. It is so indulgent and tasty. And I think that's one of the great things about knowing how to cook, about culinary literacy. And unfortunately, culinary literacy has been outsourced, right? We've outsourced so many aspects of what it means to be a self-sufficient human these days, because we live in the era of specialization, right? We outsource our health literacy. We outsource financial literacy. And culinary literacy, we outsource too when we go to restaurants and when we order up food on our food apps. It's become so easy to order a meal comprised of comfort food and have it show up on our doorsteps moments later. But by learning how to cook, and this doesn't have to be difficult, you can make some of your favorite comfort foods and have them actually provide an additive benefit to your health as opposed to taking away your health, right? Like, you can actually make fries super healthy because potatoes are actually a fairly nutrient-dense food, right? Purple potatoes are a staple in Okinawa, which is one of the world's blue zones. I know you talk about blue zones all the time.
Right.
You can make fries with purple sweet potatoes and bake them, and they come out delicious. You can use extra virgin olive oil if you want to add a little bit of fat to it. Really, really increase the indulgence factor. But my vegan carrot noodle mac and cheese is so tasty, and really, I mean, that's a recipe like many others that I include in Genius Kitchen to show people that you can have foods that are indulgent, that taste delicious, but that aren't going to hijack your brain's reward centers and be so easy to overconsume that you end up putting on unintentional weight as a result. That's not what this is about. Genius foods, genius meals, to me, are foods that satiate your body in a way that processed junk just can't. Rich in components like fiber, which we know mechanically stretches out the stomach, makes you feel really full. Protein, which is the most satiating macronutrient. Fat, which helps slow digestion of food, right? So anytime you add fat to a dish, you're slowing digestion, you're maintaining that feeling of satiety. You know, if you fill yourself up on low-fat foods, you might feel full in the moment, but you're going to feel really hungry pretty soon after, and that's because low-fat foods digest so rapidly. Fat slows down what's called gastric emptying. So whenever you add fat to something, it slows down the rate of absorption, and it makes you stay full longer. It's one of the reasons why I add now heavy cream to my coffee. I used to drink my coffee black. Sometimes I still do enjoy it black. But when I add heavy cream to it on an empty stomach, it slows the infusion of caffeine. It makes me feel a lot better. It makes me feel a lot less jittery than when I just drink it black, which for many years I was doing. So knowing how food affects your hunger, your behavior, I think it's all part of the process of learning how to better nourish and satiate your body, and minimize your risk for unintentional weight gain today, but chronic disease